I'm Pastor Dick Stadler, and I'm here again with Ann Carter and with Tim Carter, and we're talking Sunday readings. And we're talking about the readings that many people will hear this Sunday in their churches for Advent 3, the third Sunday of Advent. Depending on what your tradition is, you may have all blue candles on your Advent wreath, and so they'll light a third blue candle. Other traditions have purple candles or violet candles, and they have a third candle that is pink for this particular Sunday. And it's called in Latin, Gaudete Sunday, which means rejoice. And you'll see where that comes from in the Epistle Lesson when we get to it. So let's take a look at the readings that people will hear. The Old Testament lesson many will hear is from Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 14 to 20. The Epistle Lesson is Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 7. And the gospel reading is from Luke chapter 7, verses 18 to 28.
A reading from Zephaniah. Sing, daughter Zion. Shout aloud, Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He has turned back your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm. On that day they will say to Jerusalem, do not fear, Zion. Do not let your hands hang limp. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. I will remove from you all who mourn over the loss of your appointed festivals, which is a burden and reproach for you. At that time I will deal with all who oppressed you. I will rescue the lame. I will gather the exiles. I will give them praise and honor in every land where they have suffered shame. At that time I will gather you. At that time I will bring you home. I will give you honor and praise among all the peoples of the earth, when I restore your fortunes before your very eyes, says the Lord.
So if we take a look at what the old Zephaniah has to say, it's a very short prophecy. There's only 3 chapters in Zephaniah. And as you read this, Tim, what questions did you have as you think that people in the pew are going to ask?
Well, my first question was, Zephaniah? Which book is this? This is one we don't really hear from very often. And I honestly did a double check to make sure I didn't misspell Zechariah. So I'm wondering, what do we know about the book of Zephaniah? Why is it so short? Who was Zephaniah, and what is this reading all about, basically? What is the context here?
Okay.
Well, I can take a stab at it first. Zephaniah is one of the minor prophets. We've got major prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, and we've got minors, and their books are short. They wrote in this period as the kingdoms were either destroyed and taken into captivity, or while it's going on. Zephaniah wrote during the reign, it says in verse 1 of the book, of Josiah, who was one of the last kings of Judah. He lived probably, Josiah ruled 640 to 609. He was one of, the history of Judah was there was a good king, there was a bad king, there was a good king, there was a bad king. And Josiah came on the heels of one of the worst kings that Judah ever had, and his name was Manasseh. And Josiah came to the throne when he was 8, and then he ruled, and as he ruled, he was interested in serving God, and he was fascinated to discover the books of the Torah, and that had not been read. So he brought them out, had the priests read, and then he got really upset that they had strayed so far from God. And he tore down idol altars, and he got rid of Asherah poles. And God was very pleased with him. But God had been so angry at what Manasseh had did that he said, it doesn't matter, Josiah, I'm not going to do it in your lifetime. but this has got to stop. And so he was going to allow the Babylonians to come in. Now, Zephaniah, he speaks of the bad things that are going to happen because God's going to keep his word. But the end of this now, Zephaniah 3:14-20, it's the same repeated theme. God is going to judge, but God is going to bring you back. And he's going to bring someone to help you. And that's what this whole, it's just beautiful. Verse 19, I will save the lame and gather the outcast. And I will change their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. I'm doing this. It's like a cancer. I have to wipe it out, but then I'm going to restore to good health my creation and my people. It's lovely. But again, it's this theme that we have heard for the last couple of Sundays. The prophets pronounce judgment, but they pronounce promise. And the promise is coming in Jesus.
And Zephaniah functioned at about the same time that Jeremiah did. And so Jeremiah was constantly, he was identifying who the country would be, namely Babylon, who God would use to discipline his people for their waywardness. Zephaniah doesn't name Babylon by name, but he says that there is discipline coming. And in the midst of that, in this section, as Ann said, there is rich reminders of restoration and redemption. I think you mentioned a couple of them. There must be at least a dozen in this short reading that people can look for. In verse 17, the Lord your God is in your midst, so you're not alone. You've not been forsaken. One who will save you. He will rejoice over you. He's not going to just curse you. He will quiet you by his love, an affirmation that they are loved people. He will exalt over you with loud singing. You will no longer suffer reproach. And then in verse 20, when I restore your fortunes before your eyes. So a time of restoration and redemption is coming. Wow, this is just full of rich gospel. And that's why in verse 14, the reason it probably fits on Gaudete Sunday is he says, O Israel, rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. And so I'm guessing that's why the people who put together these lectionary readings chose this to be the Old Testament lesson. There's good reason. Anything else on that reading? Any other questions or thoughts?
I have one last comment that doesn't have really anything to do with anything, but when I was doing a little research and doing a little background on this, I was struck by the fact that Josiah, when he was making inquiry of the Lord as to how he should live, he went to Huldah, Huldah, a prophetess. Now, there are lots of people who say there weren't any women active in the Bible. God didn't want women in the church. Oh yeah, he did. And here's a prophetess. We don't hear about many of them, but here is one who prophesied to Josiah what Josiah was to do, and Josiah listened, and Josiah had a blessed life because of it. So on that note, we can move on.
Yeah, and there's a number of women that are mentioned in the Old Testament. It's just not a very literate position to take that women aren't there, but you've done your reading, you know that. And they're also in the New Testament. You have prophets.
Lots of women in the New Testament worked.
A reading from Philippians. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
The epistle lesson from Philippians 4 is really fascinating because it starts out in verse 4 with the word rejoice twice. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Now remember, who's writing this? Paul is in prison. And he doesn't know for sure he's going to get out or if he's going to live. And yet he's able to say from his faith as a great witness to faith in a God of salvation, you can still rejoice. And so then he reminds them, whatever it is that might be robbing you of your joy, don't be anxious about anything. And so people getting this letter would have to think about his circumstances and say, wow, he's concerned about us when he's facing all of this uncertainty in his own life, things that could make him anxious. But his faith, he was really witnessing to his faith. And so he goes on to say, and the peace of God will pass all understanding. Now, are there other questions that you think someone may have about this passage? It's a short passage, but it's full of rejoice exhortations. Tim.
Well, my first thing that struck me was how short it is. It's just 3 verses. It's only, I mean, on here it's 1, 2, 3. It's only 6 lines long, or 6 lines long. And I was wondering why is this short passage kind of sandwiched between Zephaniah and Luke, and why is this here? Just a Sunday or two before Christmas. What is this? Why is it here, and what should we be looking for, and what should we be trying to glean from this as we listen to it?
On verse 5, this is a guess again of why it was put in here. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. And this congregation and these people who had just newly come to faith, whose leader was now in prison, don't know if he's going to be executed. We live in those kinds of uncertain times as well. We're waiting for Christ to come back. The Lord is near. Things aren't so good though. But we have to remember that we rejoice in what he has given us because he has taken care of everything. One thing that struck me when I looked at this, he says in verse 7, the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. He doesn't say anything about your body. He's in prison. He might die, but that's not important because Christ is in his heart, is in his mind, is in his spirit. The Spirit of God is with him. So even though his life and his body may be destroyed, he will live. And that is cause for rejoicing. And that is cause for us to rejoice as well as we wait for the King to come now at Christmas. But again, at the end, we live in this tension, but we always have something to be happy, thankful about. Even when we live in a time of disease and illness and cancer, besides everything else, we can always have a way to rejoice because of Christ.
And his advice certainly applies to us as we work our way through a pandemic and wonder if we're going to have a new surge and whether we're going to have a new variant that's going to be worse than the old variants, whether the vaccines that we've received will work against the new viruses. So we're, as Nan said, we're living in a time of real uncertainty, but here's all the more reason for his reminder. Focus on what God is and that the kingdom is here with you, that God has not abandoned you. And that's what kept him going in Rome, in imprisonment. Yeah. Anything else on the short epistle? And if we go to the gospel lesson in Luke chapter 7, verses 18 to 28.
The Holy Gospel according to Luke. John's disciples told him about all these things. Calling 2 of them, he sent them to the Lord to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" When the men came to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to ask you, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" At that time Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." After John's messengers left, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxuries are in palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you.' I tell you, among those born of women there is no one greater than John. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he."
The disciples of John came to Jesus and gave him a report and said that, our master has been imprisoned by Herod Antipas because John was railing against Herod Antipas for committing a legalized adultery. He had her divorce her husband, who was his brother, a different Philip than the Philip who's in charge of Iturea, and he then marries her. And John speaks out against that as just adultery. And finally, Herod puts him in prison. And now the disciples come to Jesus and they have all these questions on behalf of John. And so the question is he going through a period of a doubt and a curiosity, or is he using this pedagogically as a tool to get Jesus to tell his disciples what John hopes will reinforce what he's been maybe teaching them? Are there questions that you have as you read this lesson, Tim, that you think people might also ask?
Well, this is interesting to me, and it kind of brings to mind questions about the relationship between John and Jesus. How well did they know each other? Had they met before? How long has John been out in the wilderness doing his baptizing and preaching? Is he much older than Jesus? Are they the same age? Have they been have they been kind of at the same time working and then just working toward each other? Or has John been around for a while and now Jesus is coming up? So just, whatever we know or can glean about the relationship between John and Jesus, I would find very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we know that they were similar in age, because when Mary, who has just had the announcement,
That's right.
we'll read that next week. It has been announced to Mary that she's pregnant. She goes to see Elizabeth and Elizabeth is pregnant. So we know that they are pretty close in age.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
I'm with you, Tim. I have lots of questions. John's father was a priest. Did that mean that he was wealthy? Were they from an upper middle class family, so to speak? I often think that he was poor, but if he went into the desert, did he throw that old life behind and went into the desert? Did Jesus and John see each other every year when Jesus and his parents came down from Passover? Did they talk to each other a lot about their own callings and what was going to happen?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fascinating to think about.
Mm-hmm.
On a chronological note, as we learned last time, if John started his preaching in the 15th year of Tiberius, that would put him at about starting his preaching at about 29 AD. So there are some who think that he was preaching for 2 or 3 years before Jesus started his ministry, because he certainly had crowds. It was a lot of speculation.
Okay.
What else do we know for certain, Dick?
Well, I don't know if we know for certain, but he may have started 27, 29, 28 AD, but there are some guesses in recent scholarship that John was affected by the Essenes, that he studied with them at Qumran. There's no evidence of that, and I don't think it fits John at all, because his attitudes about baptism are different from the immersions that the Qumranites practiced, according to all the documents that we have of them. So We just don't know how much contact John and Jesus had with each other. It's a good question to ask, Tim, because we'd like to speculate, but we don't have any evidence of that. But he recognized him when he came, and it sounds like Jesus came to be baptized by John shortly after he kind of goes public. Those two seem to fit. So here, John is now moldering away in prison. We think at Machaerus, which is across the Jordan River in what is now today Jordan. And I think he's having genuine doubts, because if you look at his ministry and the words that he preaches, he's preaching fire and brimstone and condemnation and judgment and discipline. And when he hears the ministry of Jesus, he doesn't hear anything about that. What he hears is preaching of forgiveness and healing people and forgiving people. And so his question may have been, well, where's that element that I was telling people is going to be here? You know, and he maybe not have understood that Jesus was coming twice. The first time to be the sacrifice and to be the meek and the mild Jesus, the one who would die for the sins of the world. Then the second time is when he's going to come back and fulfill all these preachings that John has said about justice and so forth, and oppression being routed out. So he may have wondered, are you really the one that we've been preparing for? And Jesus then quotes one thing after another to show him, yes, go back and tell him all the things that I'm doing. And these are all mentioned in Isaiah's prophecies. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them. These are all allusions to messianic promises in the prophets. And that would have, I think, fortified John in his faith and said, okay, I didn't waste my time. I wasn't preaching and pointing people to the wrong guy. But he needed that for himself. And so I've heard people suggest that he was using this as a pedagogical tool, but I think that's trying to make John bigger than life. I've had doubts along the way as a pastor, and I think a lot of people have. And it's not inconceivable to me that John had his doubts and questions and just wanted to know for sure. And Jesus, I think, sent this back, and we're not told what impact it had on John, but I believe that it really fortified him in his faith.
Well, if you look at where John was, trapped in a dungeon in the palace of Herod Antipas along the Dead Sea, he was stuck. He wasn't going anywhere. And I take great comfort that a man who dedicated his life to God, who had doubts, God satisfied those doubts. He reached out and he gave him what he needed. And he gives all of us what we need if we just ask him for it.
Well, yeah, good. And in the second part of this reading, he's going to affirm that John is an exemplary prophet and speaker. He says, is he a prophet? Yeah, he's more than a prophet. This is of whom the scriptures say, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way for you. That's from Malachi. And the one who is least, but then he says something really puzzling. The person who is least in the kingdom will be greater than John. Now, how do the least in the kingdom become greater than John? Again, if you try to answer that from the law, you're going to miss the point. The point is, John was pointing people to what Jesus would do, but he never got a chance to see it fulfilled because he got killed by Herod Antipas before Jesus went to the cross. And the least in the kingdom, who's alive either during or after the time of Jesus' crucifixion, will have a greater understanding and a greater amount of information that they can share with others as to the reality of Jesus. And that's my take on what makes him greater, that makes anybody in least in the kingdom greater than John the Baptist. Not the things that they do, but the things that they now know about Jesus from experience. Anything else on this particular reading? There is that one little part at the end where he says people are constantly looking for me to do what they want in the marketplace, and they play the flute and they want me to dance, or they want me to do this, they want me to do that. He saw, and we've seen that all through his ministry. People wanting Jesus to be their genie in a lamp. And Jesus says, sometimes I will help you out, and sometimes I may decide on my divine knowledge not to do it. So, well, if there's nothing else to add, we want to thank all of you who are watching for being here with us and eavesdropping on our conversation. And we also encourage you to take time to prepare for the celebration of our Lord's incarnation by just simply thinking about Jesus and maybe reading more scripture on all promises that were made, that he fulfilled. So God bless you all with a real rich Advent full of lots of good memories and time with family and time at church if you are able. So long.